In this lesson, we will see more in detail how to create a new file and how to set up all the various details to make it optimal for whatever type of project we'll be working on. Let's start by opening a new file. As you may remember in the previous lessons, we covered that a new file can be opened in two different ways. We have this section here at the center of our workspace under Start, and here we have a direct access to New File. We can also go up to our drop-down menus up here on the top left corner, and under File we will have New. And as we said in the previous lesson, we can also access this function by clicking contemporarily on our keyboard, the Control key and the letter N. So let's go ahead and click on New. As you can see, we have this window now that has opened up at the center of our workspace. Create new document. Here we can access all the various details that make up our file, and all of these options like the width, the height, the resolution are important for the desired outcome of our project. Like for example, if it is going to be printed or published online. But now let's go ahead and see every little aspect in detail. As you may have noticed, this window is divided in three sections. We have this main section here where we can find all of these various templates that are pre-made by Krita that come in very handy when we have a specific type of project that we need to do, like comic strips or an animation, but we will see these further on in the lessons. On the right side of this window, we have these two sections, dimensions and content. Let's start off by looking at dimensions. Right below, we have predefined. By clicking on the arrow right here on the right, we have the possibility to choose from a large variety of predefined, pre-made dimensions that are basically universal. All of these dimensions at the top that you can see that start off with the letter A on the left and followed by a number on the right are all dimensions that are usually used for print, in the sense that all of these dimensions are easily printable with our universal printers. A4, for example, is our everyday home printer, photocopier sheet size, or a notebook size. It is the most common print size, and the dimensions are 210 millimeters by 297 millimeters, or 21 centimeters by 29.7 centimeters. If we go right above that with A3, it is exactly two A4 sheets next to each other, which means that it is 297 millimeters by 420 millimeters, or obviously 29.7 centimeters by 42 centimeters. If we go to this A5 measure instead, this is exactly half of an A4 sheet. So it is 148 millimeters by 210 millimeters, or of course 14.8 centimeters by 21 centimeters. And so on. All of these dimensions that start with an A and are followed by a number are the most commonly used for print. We also right below have these film options, like the 16 by 9, which is the international standard format of HD TV. So the most common size for televisions and computer monitors. And this has replaced the 4 by 3, that is basically a full screen. Moving on, we have other dimensions here, like we have all of these texture options. These are great for creating, as it says right here, a texture or a pattern. And these become very useful because they are, as you may notice, all square optioned, all square dimensions. So 1024 millimeters by 1024 millimeters, 2048 by 2048, 256 by 256, and so on. These being square makes it very easy to be able to multiply and create a very seamless pattern that can be as big or as small as one desires. And we can see these further on when we go into more detail. Right below, we have these other three options that are the US legal, US letter, US tabloid. These as well are universal measurements, and they are usually used for exactly what we can see next to them. So for our basic letter, or for a tabloid document, or for a legal document. So we have this very easy access to all universal measurements that can be opened and will be ready if we need these specific measurements. But if we also look here on the right, we have these two options that define the orientation of our files. So if we wanted vertical or horizontal, or more specifically, portrait mode or landscape mode. Right below this, we have the option also to put in personalized measurements. So if we have a specific type of file that we need to create that we can't find in the measurements here, we have the possibility to create our own measurements with width and height. And also very important, we have the option to choose the type of measurement. So if it's in pixels, points, inches, centimeters, millimeters, these are all very common. But the main ones that we will usually use when we're working on design documents are millimeters, centimeters, and pixels. The difference between these are important, but they have to do mainly with the outcome, the desired outcome of the project that we are working on. For example, if we're working on a project that is destined to be published online, pixels is surely the perfect measurement for this. Pixels are the most commonly used for projects that will be published online or on social media, or basically viewed through any screen. And this is because when we're working with pixels, we are able to regulate the final size or weight of the file. This is very important because when we're working on something that will be published online, there is the need to have a lighter file so that it's easier to upload and that it's easier to be loaded each time you open the web page or the social media page. You may notice this when you are opening different web pages or different social media pages, that some images load very fast and others take more time. This is due to the weight of those images. This is because pixel graphics are composed of numerous small squares. This means that when you zoom out on an image, it will have great clarity and great resolution. But when you zoom in, it will lose that resolution and you will start to see all those little squares that will create that very grainy effect. In this case, since the final destination of the file would be to be published online, as we said before, there wouldn't be the need to zoom in on an image and risk losing the picture quality. So in this case, Pixel is the perfect solution for any online publications. If we go to millimeters or centimeters instead, these are the best solution for anything that will be printed. This is because the quality and the details are a lot more important in this case. And if a design needs to be printed, the heaviness of the file isn't as important. And this is because it only needs to go through a printer. And once it's printed, there's no need for any other action on said file. So if the final output of your project is a print, then definitely millimeters or centimeters are the way to go. So we can stay on pixels for now and continue looking at this section right here. This section is very important because it gives you, as we said before, the possibility to create personalized dimensions. So for example, if you need to create a document that has very specific width and height, then this is the best solution for you. So let's imagine that you have been asked to create an illustration or a painting or anything of that sort for maybe an Instagram post. We can search online what the width and height of an Instagram post is. So we can do a very quick online research. I had already searched it up, Instagram post size. So in this case, they say 1080 by 1080 pixels. As we just said, pixels are the best solution for anything that needs to be published online. And here it goes in detail saying that the ideal size for square posts is 1080 pixel by 1080 pixel at a 1:1 aspect ratio. There are a few other options here. So if you want to do a landscape or a portrait image, for example, but let's say for now that we want to do a square post for Instagram. So now that we know what the sizes we need are, we can type them in here. So 1080 by 1080, and we already have our pixels picked out here. The best part of this is that you can save these measurements and put them in our list up here with all the other predefined measurements so that you can easily access it whenever you need without having to type it in again. This is especially useful if the measurements are more complicated and harder to remember. So you can save it here by typing in a title. So let's call it, for example, Instagram square post. We can click on save. And now when we scroll our predefined, we will find it here at the bottom, Instagram square post. We also have right below the option to modify the resolution. And don't worry if you have already saved your measurements, this can always be modified after, nothing is set in stone. The resolution is very important also because of the final weight of the image that we're working on. So as we said before, if an image or illustration or any type of project that we're working on needs to be published online, the weight is very important. If we are going to work on something that needs to be printed, 300 is the minimum resolution that we will need. So in that case, 300 would be okay. But if we need to publish something online, as we have been imagining so far, then in that case, the minimum resolution needed is actually 72 pixels. All of these various details in reality go and influence the final weight of our image. And we can actually see that as we're working on these, as we're putting in all these various details, we can see how the image size is changing in this little section below. So at the moment, with all of these details that we have put in, it says this document will be 1080 pixels by 1080 pixels, which is perfect. Right now, it also tells us the type of color method that it's in, but we will go see this in a little bit. And then it says that the pixel size is 32-bit. This means that a single paint layer will thus take up 4.4 megabytes of our RAM. So we can see this better in detail later on, but it is interesting to know that while we are putting in all our different measurements and details, we can see step by step how the measurements and how the weight of the file changes. We can move on now to this bottom section here, color. Under color, we have these three different options where we can go in and choose the various other details for our document. Starting off with model. This has to do with the color model that we choose for the project we're working on. The color model is extremely important, and unfortunately, many of us have only found out the importance of this only after some unfortunate mistakes when printing out a project. So by learning exactly what color models are, you can definitely avoid mistakes when printing or publishing online. So let's dive in and see what they are and what the differences are. By clicking here on this tab, you will find all of these different options. Definitely the most used and the most important color models to know are this one up here, which is CMYK, and this one, which is RGB. But what is the difference between these two and what are they exactly? Both of these, so CMYK and RGB, are modes for mixing color in graphic design. So it is the way that the colors are processed and the way that they are mixed together and will affect the end result of how colors are viewed. But let's go into detail and see what are the differences between these two models. So RGB stands for red, green, and blue. It is the color space for digital images. So the same way that we will use pixel or centimeters and millimeters for print or for publishing online, we'll do the same with color models. RGB is usually used for publishing online, and we will see that CMYK is usually used for print. But let's continue seeing in detail this color model. RGB is an additive mixing method. That means that the more you add colors one on top of the other, the brighter the end result will be. What does that mean? That a light source within the device creates any color you need by mixing red, green, and blue and varying their intensity. This is known as additive mixing, as I said, and all colors begin as black darkness and then red, green, and blue light is added on top of each other to brighten and create the perfect pigment. So when red, green, and blue light is mixed together at equal intensity, they create pure white. So in this case, designers can control aspects like saturation, vibrancy, and shading by modifying any of the three source colors, so the red, green, and blue. And because it's done digitally, we can manipulate how the light on the screen manifests to create the color that we want. So again, definitely the model RGB will be used for anything that has to do with digital graphics, with web and app design, with branding. So again, stuff that has to go online, with social media for post, pictures, backgrounds, any visual content like videos, infographics, photographs for websites, anything that is going to be viewed through a screen is definitely going to need the RGB color method. Instead, for print, we are definitely going to go up and click on CMYK. This stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which stands for black. In this case, very different from the RGB method, a printing machine will create images by combining these colors to varying degrees with physical ink. So it is known as a subtractive mixing. So as I mentioned before, talking about RGB, in this case, it's an additive mixing. But with CMYK, it means that all colors start as blank white, and each layer of ink reduces the initial brightness to create the preferred color. So when all colors are mixed together, they create pure black. And if you remember before, we mentioned that with the RGB method, all colors mixed together created pure white. But continuing on with CMYK, so cyan, magenta, yellow, black. Definitely, if you're going for print, you will use this method. So if you're doing anything like designing business cards, stationery, advertising like billboards, posters, flyers, brochures, maybe merchandise like t-shirts or hats, product packaging, even restaurant menus, anything that will go through a printer is definitely going to be needing the CMYK color method. In this case, since we are imagining that we are going to be designing for an Instagram post, we will definitely use the RGB color model. Moving on, we have depth, and this has to do with the quantity of gray that can be inside of a pixel. So in our case, working on a project that is destined to be published online, so as we said before, an Instagram post, this detail isn't that important to us because this 8-bit is sufficient for the work that we have to do. But if we open up, we can see that we have different options. So the main reason to go and open up depth and maybe change this detail from 8-bit to 16-bit, for example, is if we need to go and modify in detail, and I mean in extreme detail, colors. So this possibility would only arise if we are working, for example, on a photograph. So if we need to go and modify a photograph's color in detail, then definitely the option to choose is 16-bit. But since that is not the case, and it's definitely not going to be the case when using this software, Krita, which is mainly used for illustration, paintings, and graphics, we will not be using this software to be modifying photographs in that amount of detail. But it is good to know. If you are going to be modifying a picture, if you are going to be working on a photograph, definitely it is good information to know that 16-bit would be the best advised option. But in our case, we can stick with our 8-bit and we can move on. Profile, again, for the type of work that we're going to be doing isn't as important, but it is a very, very interesting aspect of this software because it allows us to go in depth in a lot of information. So if we open it up, we can see that there are all of these various different options. At the moment, this is our default option, which has to do with the color method that we chose. So for example, if we were to go back here under model and click on the CMYK color model, this will change to chemical proof. So it all has to do with the color model. But let's go back and click our RGB model and now see here how it has gone back again to the RGB version, which is the default one. And again, down here, it has shown the difference in the document's weight. Now, the interesting part in this is if we click here on the color space browser, this window will open and we will find these two main sections. In this section here on the left, we will have all of the different options that we find when opening the profile part. And also we have the option to change our color model again. And then this section here on the right, under profile properties, we have the opportunity to scroll and read all of the information that we need to know on the color method and why it's best to use for certain projects. So for example, here we have a great explanation of exactly what the RGB method is. It's the color model used by screens and other light-based media, as we mentioned before. It is an additive color model as well, we mentioned this. And adding colors together makes them brighter. So this color model is the most extensive of all color models, and it is recommended as a model for painting that you can later convert to other spaces. So this section here is so useful to go in depth and to learn even more about the color model that we're using. As we can see here, by clicking on the CMYK, we'll have further explanation on this color model. So definitely it is a section that I suggest to read into so that we know more in depth what we are going to work on. But for now, let's go back here and click on our original color model that we chose, RGB, and we can click OK and move on. Now that we have covered this section, we can move on to the content section here. And this is also useful because it allows us to bring more details and modify more things on our document. For example, we can give it a name. We can title it Instagram post now that we have decided what we are going to do. We can already decide the amount of layers that we want our document to have. Now, layers is a very important argument that we will be discussing further on in the lessons. It is a fundamental part of designing, definitely when it comes to graphic design. It helps optimize your work time, but we will see this more in depth. We can already notice here in one of our panels, it's on the right, but it is turned off at the moment because we can't use it yet. But here in this section, content, you get the possibility to choose the amount of layers that you want to start off with. But as you may notice here in this section, there is still the possibility to add more layers by clicking on this plus icon, or removing layers by clicking on this icon on the right. But again, we will see this more in depth in the following lessons. For now, we can leave 2 layers. We can also go ahead and choose a background color to start with. So by clicking on this white section here, we have the possibility to choose all the various colors that we have, or also choose a personalized color that we can move around and pick which one is best. This is a great option if you already know exactly what you're going to go and create in your illustration, in your painting. If, for example, you're going to be illustrating a jungle or something that is mainly one color that will have all shades of green, and you know that there won't be any white in it, then you can go ahead and choose a shade of green, for example, and that will make the design process maybe faster and maybe easier. We also have the possibility to click on the color selector here by clicking on this. As you may see here, the numbers are changing. We can choose a color that we have already decided previously. Maybe if we have saved an image of a color that we particularly like, we can use this tool right here to pick that color and copy it. But for now, in our case, we can definitely go ahead, deselect our color selector and click on white for now, because we won't need any specific color at the moment, and we can click on OK. We also have the possibility to choose the background opacity, so how transparent or not our background will be, how transparent or opaque. And in our case, again, we definitely don't need a transparent background. We can stick with a fully opaque white background. And we also have the possibility to choose what type of background we want. If we want it as a raster layer, if we want it as a canvas color, or as a fill layer. For now, we can definitely leave it as a raster layer. Here we also can leave a little description of what we're working on, of what the project is, or maybe the amount of work that we have done. We have the possibility to write it down in this little description box. That way we can always go and check on it. But for now, it is okay like this. We have definitely covered all of the necessary steps that we need to create a new document. In our case, again, we are trying to create a illustration or a graphic or a painting for a possible Instagram post. So let's go ahead and check that everything is the way that we decided initially. So on predefined, we still have this A4 selected. We can go ahead and select our Instagram square post that we created previously. We can see that the orientation is in portrait mode, but that doesn't interest us at the moment because we know that we have a square, so the orientation doesn't matter. It is 1080 pixels by 1080 pixels. We have a 300 resolution, which we can actually go and make 72, because as we said before, 72 resolution is perfect for publishing online. So we can go ahead and save that. Then we have our RGB color model, which is perfect again for anything that is destined to be viewed through a screen. We have 8-bit depth, which is perfect. The profile, which is tied to our color model. And then our content, we have our name, our layers, and our background color. So we can go ahead and click create. Now you can see that it has opened a perfectly white square, and we can see all of the details that we have chosen in this section here at the bottom. So we can notice again our color method, which is the RGB, our 8-bit depth, our profile. We can see here perfectly the measurements that we chose, and also the weight of our file, so how heavy our file will be. At the moment, it is 4.5 megabytes. Here we have our 2 layers that we chose. Our background is perfectly white and opaque, but we still have the option to add layers if we want. Again, we will see this more in depth in the future lessons. By leaving our mouse on this section right here for a little bit more, we can see that this little window will open up where we have more in specifics, the size of our file, how much memory we've used, how much every part of this file weighs. So the image size, the layers, the projections, the memory that we've used, and so on. So for now, we've covered everything we need to know for creating a new document, how to change the dimensions, how to use the pre-made dimensions, the color method, and so on. We can end this lesson here. Make sure to leave a like if you have enjoyed this video, and leave a comment if you have any questions or any suggestions. And make sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to stay updated on our software updates and courses, and if you want to give us a bit of support. That's it for now. I will see you in the next lesson.